Hello everyone, just an update on this sort of automatic camo skin thing that I'm working on in Unreal 5. I've added a few features to make it easier to test stuff. Um, and one of those is zoom, because I kind of always had a problem with being so close to the character that it's always super obvious to see him. And being able to see what it looks like from a distance is pretty useful for how effective the actual system is for disguising a character. Also like a very basic crouch now, which is just item, it looks atrocious. It's just using the start in one of the free animations from the store. Don't worry about it too much. And the other thing I fixed is previously I never stepped in shadow in like the last time I showed this off, and that was because there was a bug where you'd look super dark in shadows. But now you should just look like the normal, that have the same lighting as everything else. So it makes it actually easier to conceal the character in a shadowy environment because they'll be the same, have the same flat lighting as everything else, and obviously in daylight they will have the light and dark sides, which gives them away a bit more. So yeah, and then as you might notice, the other big thing that's changed is the character no longer always replicates what's behind them perfectly. They will kind of have this sort of camouflage pattern effect on them based on the colours of what is behind them. And this is achieved by applying a noise layer to the scene capture of the world that we have. So the easiest way to demonstrate that is with this wall here. So I've turned the noise off for now, and this is what we would get with the previous system, where we do kind of have like this almost like kind of perfect replication of what's behind us, but as soon as like you turn, you know, that illusion of transparency is kind of broken straight away. So that doesn't work super well in all cases, for the purposes of camouflaging you for obvious reasons. So what is slightly more useful is what we get if we apply a little bit of noise. So like here is with a very small amount of noise. There's two parameters to play with here. There's the magnitude and there's the scale. And the magnitude is sort of how, I suppose you can imagine it as like a paintbrush is sort of like swirling the colors. The magnitude is like how far the paintbrush will move across the page. So the more I increase it, the further the colors get from their original locations. So you can kind of see that before we had this like very evenly divided sort of like quadrants, and now the colors are kind of leaking out into the rest of the model. If I turn it all the way up to higher value, now it's pretty much random which colors are where. They are still the same colors of what's behind us, so if I like do it over here, well, it'll be kind of like a mix of two different types of grey. But there's no real like which part of the character they appear on is pretty much random at that point. So that was magnitude. The other thing to play with is the scale of the noise. So if I put us back down to a low magnitude, and then turn the scale up, this is essentially the, going back to the paintbrush analogy, if magnitude is how far we move the paintbrush, the scale is how erratically we move it around when blurring the image up. So you might notice the borders got a bit more kind of granular and broken up. And further still, and so on. And if we go all the way to something very high, we start to get a kind of like spray can sort of effect over the character. And if we go down to something very low, I don't know if you can see, but there's numbers in the top left. that I'm changing. But, as I'm doing this, going down to something very low, we get something like this that looks incredibly weird. And if you kind of mix with having like a low scale and a high magnitude, you can start to get some like very sort of strange looking things that are very different from the normal kind of camo pattern. So like here we've got like a more kind of almost like mono starry night kind of looking thing. So the reason I started, one of the things I found out about playing with these parameters was that there's no real set of them that works for every scenario. So let's go back to how it used to work in the old system. If I capture the scene here, so this like does a reasonable job of hiding the character's body, where the head still stands out, because like it doesn't do anything to remove that hard shadow on the left side of the face. And also, if you view it from a different angle, like the brown head sort of breaks up a straight line, the straight line where we get a transition between the grass texture and the wood texture, which draws the eye, and then also, obviously, it stands out a lot against the green background. Whereas if I bump up the noise magnitude, try the same thing. Obviously, this like doesn't look as perfect, but the green kind of does help to, because it's lighter, does help break up the hard left shadow a little bit. But also as we rotate, it's less obvious that it's kind of breaking a straight line. It's less obvious that it's obstructing the leaves behind it. And like obviously when we're right up close to the character like this and we know they're there, it doesn't look super convincing. But when you see it from like a reasonable distance like this, I think would be fairly difficult to spot them if you are, say, they're in your peripheral or you're moving or anything like that. And obviously it gets doubly hard if you hide in a bush, but you could hide a character of any color if you clip them all the way into the geometry like that. So yeah, like this set of parameters that introduces noise works quite well for situations like that, where you do have like a kind of contrasting colors, but there's you don't necessarily want to perfectly replicate what's behind you because it ends up being more obvious than not. And here we have kind of the opposite situation, where we have a noisy pattern behind us already, and adding the additional noise to it kind of loses the pattern entirely and returns us to something more uniform. Kind of wraps around from being having a pattern to not having a pattern because it's too granular. And in this scenario, I find it's better to have either a very small amount of noise or no noise at all. I find the character blends in a lot better there. It's kind of, I go back and forth on whether no noise is actually better than a little bit of noise. It's hard to say really, but I found like the general principle of like it's better to kind of replicate this pattern behind you and just use that to try and blend in. Because you already don't have much of an outline if you're using this pattern. Especially on the shady side of the wall, because you don't have the shadow as well. But I still think the principle holds up here, where the natural kind of pattern of the wall helps break up the silhouette anyway, so you're not really losing anything by replicating it. Same situation kind of for all of these kind of tiled textures. If you mimic the pattern and stand still, it does look pretty close to like transparency, and then if you rotate a bit, like yeah, you can still see the character, but it's better than you know, something with a bit of noise to it, which you know is obviously very different. It kind of breaks your eyes can see the break in the pattern very easily, so you have to fill the pattern in to get it. I mean, obviously this is a very unnatural scenario. You wouldn't expect your camouflage to work very well if you were just standing next to a flat wall, but this seems to be the best option out of what's available. But if we had, say, a wall here like this, and then a forest, like some trees over here, then you actually maybe would want to go with the more like classic camouflage pattern and just hope that you're observed from the right angle. So yeah. But all these environments are pretty unnatural, but I have set up a test level that has a slightly more natural look to it, and we'll go there now. Okay, so here we are in my jungle. You have to excuse how crappy it looks. It's, you know, I'm not an artist. So we've got the big ball trees and the randomly placed bushes. But yeah, this is a little bit closer to like what environment you would expect this sort of thing to be useful in. So that's kind of the purpose of it. And yeah, like we can kind of see here that using it in like, if we kind of zoom out a bit, it does help do a good job of like breaking up your outline. And standing next to trees and stuff like that. It does also kind of do a good job of like blurring your interactions with the bushes and that sort of thing. Oh, and yeah, that's the other thing. There are NPCs in this level who are, some of them are crouching, some of them are standing up. This might not be the first one you've seen if you've been paying attention to the background. But they, every like 4 to 6 seconds, they will reapply their camo using your camera as the perspective to do it from. So yeah, I kind of just use that to test whether the system actually does work well at disguising it, and I find generally it does. You know, obviously some of them are crouched in bushes, which would make them hard to spot, no matter what color they are, as long as they're not like bright pink. But the amount of times I just run past them is quite surprising. So like, I have one here just stood in the open. That's quite easy to spot, obviously. If I run around a bit, like pretend I'm kind of actually playing a game, that one's obviously pretty easy to spot, standing up. Rotate around a bit more. So I've added a button that makes them all very visible, so I'll just press that now. So there are 3 hidden in this scene, and I don't know about you, but I didn't see this one over here on the left, even though now that we know it's there, you can very clearly see it just by staring at it. The other 2 are like more classically kind of hidden in bushes, so they are cheating a little bit. But that one over there was obscured just by nature of the camo. This one I noticed a little bit later than I would have normally, but I did bump into it. So yeah, I think it does a pretty good, like, I don't know about you, depends how eagle-eyed you are, but a lot of the times I'm like, I just bumped into one then. I felt the collision, but I didn't actually see the character. It doesn't perfectly hide them, obviously, because it's camouflage, it's not magic. Here's one. But I find that it does do a pretty decent job of making it so my eyes aren't drawn to them, which is basically how camouflage works. It doesn't make you invisible, it just makes you not draw attention. So when I'm running around, I'm going to be looking where I'm going. I'm not going to be looking at specific bushes, and the motion blur of the bushes the motion blur of me moving is going to disguise the motion, the small movement of their breathing animations, and that sort of thing. Um, and so if they're in my periphery, and my eyes aren't drawn to that location for some other reason, or because they happen to scan over them, then I generally won't see them unless they just happen to be in like a particularly visible scenario. Like harsh lighting is always going to give people away, or if you're standing in shadow but you have harsh lighting to your back like this, that's always going to give you away. But the characters sort of skulking in the shadows are very kind of quite hard to spot. And if we had like a more overcast lighting scenario, I think it would get even more difficult to spot them. But we kind of just have like bright light and lots of shadow under the canopy. I kind of wanted to do it that way just to illustrate what is the things that give you away as well as the things that hide you. So yeah, anyway, that's what I have for now. I'm probably going to do like another video at some point to explain how it all works because yeah, it's internally it's all a bit of a mess with my got a bit of blueprint spaghetti and stuff going on, but I want to clean that up, put it in a presentable state. I think I'll just share how all the stuff works. Yeah, that's it for now. Bye bye.